Hello, and welcome to episode 119 of Dial the Gate. My name is David Reed. Thank you so much for tuning in. Stargate SG-1 co-creator Jonathan Glassner is joining us for this episode. But before we get started, if you like Stargate and you want to see more content like this on YouTube, please consider clicking that like button. It makes a difference with YouTube's algorithm and will definitely help the show grow its audience. Please also consider sharing this video with a Stargate friend. And if you want to get notified about future episodes, click the subscribe icon. Giving the bell icon a click will notify you the moment a new video drops, and you'll get my notifications of any last-minute guest changes. And clips from this live stream will be released over the course of the next few days on the gateworld.net YouTube channel. This episode is pre-recorded. Jonathan is in pre-production with Dean Devlin for his next television series, The Ark. They're actually in the middle of casting right now. So this was very last minute. It's one of the reasons I didn't give fans a chance to ask questions, because I only found out about this interview last night, and we are very grateful to have him. He has agreed to come back once The Ark is on the air so that we can have fans get into that show as well, and he will share more Stargate stories at that point. So as this is a pre-recorded interview, the moderators will not be taking questions for Jonathan this episode. Again, we will have him back in the future. But without further ado, let's go ahead and bring in Jonathan Glassner to discuss the adaptation of Stargate, the feature film, into Children of the Gods, and some memories from the first 3 seasons of SG-1, and tell us a little bit about The Ark. Jonathan Glassner, co-creator, writer, director, Stargate SG-1. Jonathan, thank you so much for being here. This means such a great deal to me to have you, and I'm glad we were able to make something work of your insane schedule.
Yeah, I'm pretty busy.
Tell me what's going on. Tell me about the I was about to say the Outpost, but we can get to the Outpost in just a moment here. Tell me about the Ark. Spoil it all for me.
Well, I can't spoil much of it for you because the network would kill me. I can really only tell you what they've already revealed, which is that it's about a ship that is designed to try to get humanity to another inhabitable planet to try to save humanity because Earth is falling apart. And it's actually a whole series of arcs going.
Oh, really? Okay.
We're just focused on one arc, yeah. And the show starts off with while everyone is asleep in the pods, something hits us and wipes out one of the pods completely, and about half the people in the other pod make it out alive. And unfortunately, the pod that was taken out were all our leaders, all our experts, all our top scientists. And these are sort of the lower level people that are left to try to survive on the ship. And they are unqualified to do it, but qualified enough to be able to pull it off. You know, they're the junior people in every department.
So this is going to be ship-based, not planet-based.
Ship-based entirely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, we are currently filling 3 sound stages in Belgrade, Serbia with ship sets.
Serbia. Wow, what a great location. All right. And
yeah, well, I mean, we shot Outpost there, and we fell in love with the people on the crew, the amazing crew. So we literally just moved our crew and our over and took our same stages and folded up the Outpost Outpost sets, because Outpost still has a chance of getting picked up elsewhere.
All right.
And set these up. So
that's fantastic. Is this going to be a family show? Is this going to be started for teens or for adults? More.
It's for adults mostly, but it's, everyone can watch it. It's not too scary or too. It's meant to be kind of lighthearted and if you've ever seen The Outpost, it's a similar tone, like actually a similar tone to Stargate.
Okay.
It's got some real danger, but everybody, it's about the characters, and everybody has a sense of humor, and we have some fun with it.
What is your take on approaching something like this when a show like Lost in Space has just wrapped, where it was we're looking for a new world, the mission kind of goes sideways with an alien attack. What is your intent on approach with projects like the Ark to make it kind of new and unique and fresh? What do you want to do that hasn't really been done?
For me, it's not about the hardware and the plot and it's much more about the people, the characters. I think that your show succeeds or fails on the audience falling in love with the characters and their interactions and how that particular group of people deals with a story that you may or may not have seen before. Stargate, for me, I attribute the success of Stargate entirely to the cast and the characters.
Agreed. 100%.
If it had been a bunch of boring people and we did the exact same story, it wouldn't have worked. It wouldn't have succeeded. But we did it with, very dynamic people and fun characters who had a sense of humor and, got along with each other and so on.
This is terrific. Now, when can we hope to see a series premiere?
I wish I knew. They haven't told us. We start shooting at the end of March.
Okay.
We're busily writing the episodes, and they're busy building the sets. The sets are going up so fast, it's astounding.
This is a good thing.
Yeah.
Do you have your cast yet? Or are you still looking?
We are casting now. We're in the midst of casting now.
Wow.
We're casting internationally, so we're looking at people all over the world. The crew on the ship is supposed to be international, so we actually want accents and that kind of thing.
Okay. Is the year of this announced yet? Like when it's taking place internally?
We're never really going to say, but just in my head, it's about 100 years from now.
Okay.
Yeah, just in terms of the level of technology, it's probably roughly where we'd be in 100, maybe 200 years, somewhere in that.
Okay. So, yeah, you were mentioning like everyone's going to have one accent, so it's either like going to be something that
everybody will not. Everybody will
not have one accent.
People will have their own accents. That's the idea. Yeah,
we'll have their own.
That's the idea.
Okay.
So it's an international crew.
All right then, very good. All right, I can't wait to see this thing. This looks like
it's looking like it's going to be a lot of fun. It's looking like it's going to be a lot of fun. Yeah.
All right. Are you looking to attach any? Are you looking for completely fresh performers across the board, or are you potentially looking for one or two people that also will have some name recognition?
No, it'll all be new people. We may. I don't know how big of stars you would consider them, but we may be using some of our cast from the Outpost.
Okay.
But only one or two of them. So.
Well, when you have someone that does the job and they can do the job, why wouldn't you consider bringing them in? I understand that.
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
As to the Outpost, so there is a possibility that it will potentially be moved over to another network? You're still exploring that option?
Yeah, I can't really say who or where, but there is somebody who's interested in it, and you never know with these things. This business is nuts.
This is true.
They wouldn't commit fast enough for us to keep shooting, so we'll see. They want to see how it does in reruns first, I think.
Understood. All right. I only learned in the last few recent years that Apple wanted to pick up Stargate SG-1 for a season 11. And Sci-Fi Channel had a clause preventing them from going to another network. So it sounds like you're good in that area on that last bit.
Yeah. I can't believe that clause existed, but
Oh, I know, but what can you do?
Yeah.
You had one more season for the Outpost planned? Am I
No,
Outpost, right?
Outpost. If we do get a new season, it's going to be really hard to write because we concluded that show. We intentionally wrote to an ending, and it ended.
Yeah, nothing lasts forever.
Yeah. So we had the final episode was a finale. It was written as a finale and ended as a finale. The last episode of season 4. So if season 5 happens, we're going to have to come up with a new villain or something that steps in and screws everything up again.
Have you seen the new Matrix?
I have not. I haven't had time.
Okay. Well, let me just
I hear mixed things.
I loved it. It was a
Oh, okay.
perfect epilogue whereby there's a little bit of a time difference, and it gives an excuse to put a button on a story that you thought was finished, but it was like, you know what? This doesn't feel like extra. So if you do it right, if you play your cards right.
Yeah. From what I've read, that they had the same issue. That kind of had felt like they ended it with the last Matrix, and then they did this movie, and they had to come up with a way to restart it, right?
Absolutely. I wanted to ask you
Hmm.
for a long time about taking us back down this road of Stargate SG-1. It's 1996, I believe. The film has come out. You and a couple of others are working on, independently of each other, an idea for a series. Where were you in your head at that time? You were working on Outer Limits,
Well,
and
um, I think Brad remembers this a little bit differently than I do, but roughly the same. He and I were doing the Outer Limits. He, we both. I was the American up there doing it, and he was the local doing it. And I had been up there for like 5 years at this point. And my wife was ready to kill me because she didn't want to be up there anymore. And so I told him, Jim, I wasn't going to come back and do any more Outer Limits. And this was season 3. And the president of MGM actually flew up to Vancouver and sat down with me and basically said in so many words, what would it take to get you to come back, to stay? And I said,
for a season 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I said, there's nothing you could do that would make me stay. And he said, because it would be like a divorce, right?
Yeah.
And then he said, well, we have a commitment from Showtime for a 22 episode order of a new series. It's yours if you want it, but you have to stay up here. And if you have an idea that Showtime would want. And I left and thought about it. And then I came back and I said, well, you have this movie in your library called Stargate that, in my opinion, should have been a series, not a movie. That it would make a great series. And apparently Brad did the exact same thing. Brad had a meeting with him and also pitched Stargate. And I'm sure Brad and I had talked about it at some point, which is why it was in both of our heads.
Because you were both on Outer Limits.
Yeah, we were both doing Outer Limits. Yeah. But Brad lived up there. He wasn't threatening to leave or anything.
Right.
But they wanted him to stay. And John Symes, the president of MGM, who was a brilliant guy, said, we can't do that. We can't do Stargate because we have a deal with Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin, so we can't do that. Anything else you want to do? And I couldn't think of anything else in their library that I wanted to do. And I was too busy to come up with a new thing. And then 2 weeks later, he called back and said, that other deal fell through. It's yours. You can do it. And how do you feel about being Brad at the time? I was Brad's boss at the time.
Okay.
But we were really, at this point, we had been doing it for 3 years and we were basically partners.
Yeah, you're in the trenches.
Yeah, exactly. And so John came back and said, how do you feel about doing it with Brad as equal partners, co-create it? And I said, great. And I guess Brad said, great too. And the rest was history. That's what we did. So we went off and wrote the pilot, and we co-wrote the pilot, and then it went from there. We had to go pitch it to the network, to Showtime, what we were going to do. They were happy with what we were talking about. They were happy with the pilot script. So we went to production, and we were so fortunate that they had that commitment from Showtime, because we went straight into full production for the series, not just the pilot, which enabled us to amortize those massive sets and visual effects and all that stuff across 22 episodes instead of just one pilot. Because that pilot would have been a $30 million pilot or something if we didn't.
It would have been ridiculous. Yeah, almost as bad as the movie.
Yeah. So that's what enabled us to do it, was that brilliant deal that John Symes had made with Showtime at the time. And then after we made, I think, 6 episodes, or maybe been 8 episodes, after we turned those in, to the network. They were so happy with it that they committed to 48 more.
Wow.
And that gave us, such creative freedom. I can't even tell you.
So this is I imagine so. So this is the first I'm hearing that Showtime and MGM had come to a 22 episode agreement of something else, but that something had not been decided. They just wanted another product.
Exactly. We had been doing the Outer Limits. The Outer Limits had been a huge success for them. It had done, very good numbers. They were very happy. So John Times was able to spin that off and say, okay, if you want more of these, then you got to give us this. And he made this great deal. And, he and the MGM, business people and stuff. And we were the beneficiaries of it.
And I, as an audience member, absolutely. I got to tell you, as a fanboy here, I found a place at the television set Saturday nights, late night, on syndicated programming, Poltergeist: The Legacy and The Outer Limits. And let me tell you something, I was more than a little bit pissed when one of those didn't come on, and instead this big ring is appearing and this girl gets taken by these snake guys, and it's like, what the hell is this? And Jonathan, after the first hour, I had not seen the movie. And after the first hour had ended, I'm sitting there going, it's still running. Why is it still running? I've got to go to church in the morning. So I taped the VCR to get the last hour, and I watched it the next day. And from that point, I was hooked. I had missed it on Showtime, but I had seen it on syndication. Immediately bought Showtime the next weekend and caught myself up. And
now, are you in the States or are you in Canada?
I am in the States.
Oh, okay.
And it was just one of those shows where the casts were kinetic, and they were the reason that you tuned in, not just for that, which is very important, mind you. It is a character in and of itself, but you guys cast so well. So can you tell me a little bit about making an offer for Richard Dean Anderson?
Well, I got to give credit where credit is due. That was John Times also.
Really?
John Times had been the executive at Paramount when MacGyver was done and was friends with Rick. And John came to Brad and I, and he said, and he thought we were going to hate the idea. I don't know why he thought that, but he came to Brad and I and he said, how would you feel about Richard Dean Anderson playing Jack? And both of us immediately said, yeah, will he do it? Can we afford him? And he said, well, let me see if I can set a meeting. And we sat down with Rick. And Rick's main thing was, he said, the way it was in the movie, the way Jack was in the movie was he was basically suicidal. And he was this dour, sad guy. He said, I don't want to play that for umpteen episodes. This guy's got to have a sense of humor.
It'd be miserable to watch otherwise.
Yeah. And we said, we're with you 100%. That's what we're planning. That's what we want to do. And we shook hands on it, and he was attacked. And he was great. It was just, I don't mean just as an actor, but as a person, he was just fun to work with.
There is something about Jack where, really fundamentally what happened with Kurt Russell's character in the feature film is of no part to Richard Dean Anderson's portrayal of the character, except when you get him into a corner in certain scenes and you understand that through line of the child suicide is always going to be there. He's just,
we kept it in. We just didn't make him looking like he was going to kill himself all the time.
Right, exactly. And the humor, his outlook on life is kind of in a place now where it's, this has happened to me. This is always going to be a part of me, but how I make fun of life is how I get through it. And we as an audience buy that, because when any of the characters or anyone else around him gets close to what happened with him as a father, he snaps. And it's one of those amazing performances that, and in terms of like the breadth of an actor, that Rick can pull that off.
Yeah.
It was just a reward to watch. And then when he's funny, we're on the ground laughing our asses off.
Yeah. And then we did a big search for the rest of the cast in Canada and the US. And that took a while. That was harder. But
tell us about finding Amanda. Carter. Samantha Carter.
Amanda, we had read, God, it felt like 1,000 women for the part. We had gotten auditions submitted from all over the world because we'd given up on finding somebody in Canada and the US. She was a really hard part to cast because Showtime wanted her to be an attractive woman.
Yeah, they wanted to sexify it a little bit.
Based
on what I've heard.
Yeah. But you also have to believe that she's an astrophysicist, that she's really smart. She's got to have that sense of humor we wanted, and that's she has to have comic timing, and she's got to have the physical presence to believe that she was trained as a soldier, right? Those 4 qualities together, and being a good actor, of course, is really hard to find. You can find any few of them, but the combination of all are really hard.
Yeah, you have to believe it.
Yeah. As soon as you have this, pretty spokesmodel playing a soldier who's an astrophysicist, it's not going to work. They've got to be a real actor, and they've got to have an intelligence to them. And then we got a tape of Amanda doing this comedy show that she was doing in Toronto.
Oh man.
And we said, let's get this woman in. And she came in and read for us and completely nailed the part. Then we brought her in for a chemistry read with Rick. Because at the time, the thought was there would be will they or won't they romance.
Right. The Air Force isn't, I'm guessing,
the Air Force
extremely involved yet.
That. And right. And she was just great. She just, she was Amanda Carter. She was just, Samantha Carter.
You got it.
Yeah. And I'll tell you a funny story about that name. I had named the lead female character in 2 shows before Stargate Samantha, because Samantha was my favorite name. I always said I was going to name my first daughter Samantha, and did. My first daughter's name is Samantha.
I did not know that.
And then my second child was born, and my wife and I were trying to come up with a name, and we came up with Amanda without realizing what we were doing. And all of a sudden I said, it can't be Amanda. I'm going to look like a weirdo here. Like I'm obsessed with Amanda Tapping or Samantha Carter. So we didn't name her Amanda. And it was really totally, didn't even, we weren't thinking of Amanda at that point. And it was beyond that. But anyway.
She is a huge director up in Canada
I know.
now. And
I know. I've kept in touch with her. My Samantha is now in Canada trying to be an actor. And Amanda has been very sweet to her. So Amanda's been
that's
giving her advice and stuff. Yeah.
Well, and we've been trying to get Amanda on the show here, and it's just one of those where it's like, she's so busy, I can't feel bad because, we'll get her on eventually. All the more power to her. She's doing exactly what she wants to do. And what she's
she's such a great woman. She's just very, very smart woman.
She's wonderful. And what she did with Carter over, all these years was just extraordinary arc.
Well, I'll tell you, she would take, when we would give her all the science babble, she would take it and study it and look up what it actually meant. And, when it came out of her mouth, it sounded like she actually knew what it was.
She had to believe it as much as she could.
Yeah, which was just great. Yeah.
You have this performance in the feature film of a 25-year-old geek who is not all there, somewhere on the spectrum, but absolutely in touch with his humanity enough to bring Jack back from the brink and kind of restores Jack through the battle that they go through and the friendship that ensues. Finding a replacement for James Spader could not have been an easy task. And when I put in the feature film the next night after finishing Children of the Gods, because I want to see what this is all about, I thought it was the same actor for a little while. It was that specific. The not only the appearance, but the choices that Shanks made. Mm-hmm. Tell me about finding
which evolved as the show went on, but he started out at that point.
Correct.
And evolved. Yeah. Um, it was interesting. We had several other actors that we were thinking we were going to go with for that part. And the problem I kept having, and I think Brad kept having too, was I just don't like this guy. Like I'm not sure I want to invite him into my home every
Daniel?
week. No, not Daniel, the actor,
Oh,
but
I
the
see.
other actors. So we'd be looking at this actor who would nail the nerd and the science and all that, but you just didn't like the guy. You didn't want to invite him into your living room. He was more of a bad guy. We had several that were like that. And we kept saying we've got to find somebody who pulls that off and is also just really likable. And then we saw film on Shanks before we met him, or before he read for us. And we were like, if he can do the nerd thing, because most of the parts he had done prior to that were the handsome,
Right, exactly.
man type. And he came in and nailed it. So, it was interesting with all the parts is that as soon as we saw them, we knew they were it. It just took us a while to find them. Same thing happened with Chris.
Yeah, Brad's old quote. All right, Teal'c, moving on. He was just there on the screen.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, I don't know if Brad remembers this, but we had seen Chris on tape, but we'd never met him or seen him in person. And then we had screen tests in LA, in the theater at MGM, and we had them all come in and read with Rick, and Chris walked in the room, and Brad and I looked at him, saw first of all how big he was and how interesting looking he was, and because I mean he's just this buff, really good looking, interesting looking kind of combination of ethnicities, and we looked at each other and said, "Please God, let this guy be able to act." Please God, because we had not found anybody. We had looked at we were at our wits' end. So Chris was. He and one other guy, and the other guy we didn't really like, were the only ones who came in to read for the screen test. And as soon as he opened his mouth, we were both like, okay, there he is. That's him. He can talk. He's a good actor. He is Teal'c.
He is.
Done. Moving on.
And that voice is making him a lot of money now with T'Challa and with Kratos, God of War. So you guys picked well.
Yeah, he was a gift from God, because that character was hard to cast.
And it's one of those that I was so surprised at in watching the pilot. You picked someone who is on the inside, who is like, you know what, I can't do this anymore. I'm done with it, and takes up his sword, so to speak, and joins our cause. Was that the intent from the original draft of the pilot, to have someone on the inside who became a traitor? And
yeah, that was always our plan. One of the things that helped Brad and I a great deal with coming up with the pilot was we really studied the movie, and the movie had quite a following, and so we wanted to be true to it as best as we could. And so what we did was we looked at the movie and we looked at all the holes in the movie. And I don't mean holes in a negative way. I mean things that they would have answered if they had gone on, right? Things that were left open. And said, so explain, how do we explain that? Who are these guards that work for Ra with the helmets, the clothes, and, what is Ra? He looks like a human, but his eyes glow. And, it was never really explained what he was. And so we came up with the whole Jaffa and gold thing. And then we said, well, if this is the case, if we have these Jaffa, one of them has to be one of our regular characters. So how do we get there? And that's how we got there.
Yeah, he's almost Stargate's Spock equivalent. It's good to have an alien or a presence among the group that can shine a mirror back on us and ask those questions, have us ask those questions, because it's a sci-fi show. It's about the deeper meaning of humanity at the end of the day, it's about good old-fashioned entertainment. But if you can ask yourself questions of humanity, you're doing something more. You're bringing the audience some higher level entertainment.
Yeah, definitely.
What?
The best science fiction asks questions,
Absolutely. It
or
does.
makes the audience ask questions.
Peter Williams as
Mhm.
Apophis, over the top, um, but you completely believe in this guy in this role. Was it tough to find Apophis as well, or was it
Now we wrote the part for Peter practically.
okay?
Peter had been in at least 3 Outer Limits, playing different kinds of different people, and so we knew him. We knew what he could do. We knew his look was interesting for that kind of character, and so he, I don't know if we literally wrote it for him, but we immediately had him in mind for it. So that one was easy.
What about Don S. Davis as General Hammond? Dana Elkar's stunt double
Again,
on MacGyver.
again, he had been in so many shows I had done up there. I did a show called 21 Jump Street up there. He was a regular on that. He was a regular on a show called Street Justice that I had done up there. And he had done several Outer Limits. And Rick knew him and loved him from MacGyver. And Rick's partner, Michael Greenberg, was friends with him. So it was kind of a no-brainer. He was a perfect choice for it.
I remember watching the pilot, and there isn't much to Hammond in the pilot. There isn't a lot of time. I remember thinking, man, because my family's military, all except for me, pretty much. Thinking, if this character can be played right, this is going to be a great part. I'm not seeing it in the pilot, but in the future episodes here. And Don, in chatting with him over the years, felt the same way. He had issues with Mario as a party's take on the character in the pilot.
Oh, really? I never heard that.
He called Mario a man of limited imagination. And I'm quoting Don here.
Interesting. He never told me that.
He was just felt that the character had places to go, and over the course of the series that was shown pretty obvious as someone who, along with Walter and some of the others, when those guys were out there, had the light burning for them at home, and that those were his kids, that was his team. And Don conveyed that beautifully.
Yeah.
Teryl Rothery. She had played, if I'm not mistaken, in an episode that you had filmed. I believe that you directed of Outer Limits, one of my favorites episodes, where, like many of Brad's, the world goes to hell. Is it Field of Fire? If I'm not mistaken, let me have a look here.
I don't remember. I can't remember any of the names of the episode.
This is one of my favorites. Outer Limits, Trial by Fire.
Oh, yeah,
Robert Foxworth, and I believe she
Yeah.
plays a character named Janet on top of it.
Yep.
Dr. Fraser doesn't appear until Brocca Divide, but once you guys found the doctor for that facility, she stuck.
Yeah, she was supposed to be a 1 or 2 episode character, but she was great. We loved her, so we just kept writing her, and she became a regular.
What is it about finding one of the things that SG-1 did so well was I think when you brought guest performers on that worked, the writers and everyone involved, I don't know if it was let's have them back, or we have this story upcoming here, this kind of works here. Where is the line between this is a great performer, I want to have them back again, and or it just happens more like naturally in the script. The script kind of the direction of the story kind of calls for them to return.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it's sort of the inverse of that in a way. If the script calls for a doctor, we're going to bring her back, unless we didn't like her.
Right.
If we didn't like her, we either wouldn't write the script, or it would be a different doctor that came in. So it's sort of the inverse of that. We generally don't write a part for somebody just because we liked them in the thing. It's got to come out of story. But we would not reuse them if we had not liked them. Do you know what I mean?
I see. Christopher Judge and I had a conversation once about talent who would sometimes their management would approach and say, you know, we'd want to have a multi-episode deal, and you guys would be like, as far as Chris was understanding, no, that's not what this is about. You know, we want them for this. If they're successful, you know, then we'll see about it in the future. But a lot of opportunities just went by the wayside from agents trying to secure multi-episode arcs and force your guy's hand in the story.
Yeah, we would never sign multi-episode or multi-year deals with anybody until we loved them, and then we would usually have our arms twisted by their agents or their managers that if you want them back for this one, they've got to come back for these three. But they had to earn that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I am looking back at the first season of that show, and it's so clear how quickly, and there are a couple of episodes in the beginning that are not indicative of the quality of the series moving forward, but you're finding your footing, and it is so impressive to me how quickly, compared to a show like Star Trek: The Next Generation, which really took like 2.5 seasons to really take off, how quickly these characters and the story direction finds its footing. What do you think was the real factor to that? Was it just the cast was gelling, or was it that, you know, you had such a good story to go with from the get-go in terms of where you wanted to take the show? Or was it that you had 4 seasons, you know, pretty quickly out of the gate? I'm always impressed by the velocity at which the cast and the story and everything comes together, how SG-1 really finds its footing, I think, by Torment of Tantalus, if not sooner, that everything is just clicking with this show.
Yeah, I think it's a certain degree of luck. I think it's a certain degree of, not tooting my own horn, but talent between me and Brad and Robert Cooper. We had a shorthand among ourselves that was mostly because, in Brad and I's case, because of Outer Limits, because we were cranking those out so fast, that I think we kind of thought the same, and we went down the same path. And when we agreed on a character's character, we stuck with it. And we had the great fortune of having this multi-episode order. So we knew we could take our time with character development. You know, on a regular series, especially these days, you have to somehow shorthand the character's character in 5 sentences in the first episode so that, you know, the audience immediately knows who that person is. And you can't do a lot of development because you could get canceled in 6 episodes and you didn't get there, you know. It's crazy. So now we had the luxury of being able to say, this is where we're going with this, but we don't have to do it yet, you know, for this character, for this relationship, for this mythology of the show. But it took some time. I mean, I think our first few episodes were not very good, frankly. But that was because we were figuring it out. We were figuring out how to do it. We were figuring out what we could afford to do and couldn't afford to do. We were figuring out what our actors could do and not do and wouldn't do. And we were getting pressure from the network to sex it up, and we didn't want to. And that was an issue. And so like that, the early episode, Emancipation something, was an embarrassment because it was all about trying to get Amanda in a sexy position for, you know, to satisfy that note. And it was not good. And eventually we just kind of said, you know, let's just do what we do well and stop trying to do that. And, you know, our audience seems to be mostly family audience anyway. We shouldn't be doing that anyway.
What were your feelings on the nudity in the pilot? Showtime required this for the series to go to air.
They didn't require it. They requested it.
They requested
it. They had this thing, and it's really interesting how this has evolved, actually. At the time, it was all about getting subscribers, much like streamers are now. And so their attitude, and I think rightfully so at the time, it's totally different now, was we have to provide something that the network TV networks can't provide, or who's going to pay for us. So that means at the time, in their minds, meant language, nudity, graphic violence. You could take everything further than you could on their network. Then with the invention of The Sopranos, they realized it could be controversial topics. It could be anti-heroes. It could be stuff that is not commercial, but is artistic. And everything changed. Sopranos really, in my mind, changed a lot of television. But when we were doing it, it was, what can you give us that we can't put on the network? And ultimately, that's why Showtime canceled us, was that you could get a show like this on network TV. It wasn't cable. And so that's why we did the nudity in that episode. And Brad and I both just cringed when we saw it on the show. And in fact, we cut it out of the rerun. And Brad cut it out of the reboot.
Yeah, the final cut.
And we never did it again.
It's just...
In fact, there was another nude scene in the pilot that we cut.
Really?
Yeah. The girl who got taken at the beginning, she had a nude scene in it.
Oh, okay. So that wasn't originally shot tighter. That was originally, she had it in her contract to go for it. Okay.
And we tightened it up. Yeah, we tightened it up and did it without.
Well, I think it's also more of a shock to when Vi gets exposed, because we're attached to Daniel, and so seeing her like this, I think, in my opinion, provides more of a punch. Because we see how vulnerable
it was integral to the story. It didn't, it wasn't gratuitous in that way, but we could have done it without it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We could have done it without showing anything and still had her be as if she's naked, simulated nudity. But it was Showtime, and we needed to give them what they were asking for.
Absolutely.
But we never again.
Were there?
And one of the reasons that Outer Limits was such a success is it had a lot of nudity, and it was completely a show that you could only do on cable, because it had some really graphic violence and disgusting sci-fi stuff, monsters and guts and gore, but that was not this show.
It took me a while to get used to it. Once I had bought the Showtime subscription for SG-1, seeing that Outer Limits was on, that I would play Outer Limits on Showtime as well. And it took me a few episodes to realize that the syndicated show that I was watching, in many respects, was not the show that was airing on Showtime. So it took me aback, honestly, as a viewer, that I didn't realize how much it was being transformed for syndication market.
Yeah, but it worked for that show because that show was not a family show.
Right, and it's an anthology.
It was a dark show. Yeah, and it was a dark show, but Stargate was not. Stargate was a lighthearted show and did not belong in that show. The violence in Stargate was also very sanitized by choice. You didn't see a bunch of blood. When somebody got shot, you didn't see a bunch of blood go.
Yeah, it's not Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah.
But it still gets the point across.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. And there is some sexual aliens kind of aspect to the symbiote and the pouch and what's going on there and everything else.
Well, Hathor was an attempt to satisfy Showtime also, and a very poor attempt. That's one of the ones I'm most embarrassed by. I wrote it, but it was
in fact,
another one.
Well, Sue Ann, we regularly have her on this show, and there are those who stick by her to this, regardless of how it came off. That character is remembered by a huge swath of.
No, I know she has a huge fan following. It's interesting. So I guess it wasn't as awful as I thought. I was embarrassed by it because I knew why it was created, was for Showtime, and just have a little sex in the show, a little sexiness.
Sexy it up. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, if the concession was not going to be made with Carter, I can understand, them wanting to say, well, can you at least give us an episode with a queen, an Egyptian queen, and goddess of sex, drug, and rock and roll? That's the way to go. I can see the position you were in.
Yeah, no, they didn't say that. It was my idea. I have to take full blame for it. I mean, they were saying can we get a little sexier on the show? And I went and looked at all the Egyptian gods and said, well, that's what Hathor is all about. So let's do a story with her, and came up with it.
What elements, aside from the suicidal Jack O'Neill, were you interested in taking from the feature film or modifying from the feature film that perhaps you didn't get to? We take the staff weapons. We literally take the molds for the Stargate in the feature film are the ones that John Smith and I'm forgetting the name of your production designer originally. He's Richard Hugh Dolan took for the series. What were there any, the Death Gliders even were taken from that? Were there any additional elements from the feature film that you were wanting to modify
the big helmets, the clothes?
Yes.
We used those in the pilot, and then we dumped them because they just were so cumbersome and so hard to do. And it was before visual effects could do them completely digitally. So we had to literally do them mechanically, and we'd lose hours in the day trying to get those damn things to operate properly. So, and they were really heavy. So you mostly had to put them on stunt people, because if you put them on actors, they'd collapse after a while.
Wow.
Yeah, we really wanted to be true to the movie. So we really tried to take as much from the movie as we could take from the movie, and then add to it. I mean, the first thing I said to John Symes in that meeting was, this is a movie that had a big gate that had, I don't remember how many symbols there are on it, but 48 symbols or something. Yeah. And you dial a combination of 8 of them. Why does it only go to one planet? This should be this should be a series. It should go to 1 million planets. And that's the kind of thing we did, was we looked at things that were in the movie and we said, how can we take this further? Robert in Torment of Tantalus took us back to, I can't remember the lady's character name, the woman.
Catherine Langford.
Catherine Langford,
yes. Yeah. And she had a fiance who got lost on the other side. I love this episode. Keen Curtis. And we have, it was a wonderful, wonderful directing. Elizabeth Hoffman, I believe she's 95 now. She's still hanging in there.
Is she really? Oh, that's good. Because we tried to get her to come back to play the role another time, and she was very sick, and we couldn't. So obviously she got well from that. I've lost track of her.
So this was
good to hear. That makes me happy.
Absolutely. I talked with her a couple of years ago. I've been meaning to write her since, but yeah, she's as far as I'm aware, still doing well.
Wow, good for her. She was so wonderful.
So this warms my heart. You were going to have Catherine back. This was before you left at the end of season 3.
Yeah, she couldn't come back because she was very sick. I think she had cancer, although they wouldn't tell us.
Okay,
and she couldn't come back, and so we didn't do it because we didn't want to recast it yet again.
Oh, I know this is true. And for all the different time periods, you had different actors playing her anyway. Yeah. Do you recall what kind of story that would have been? I
don't remember. No, it was so long ago.
Okay, that's fair.
So long ago, yeah.
It's one of those situations, going back to the helmets, where you have the budget limitations, you have time limitations with how long these things are taking on a show. In game adaptations of the game, Stargate, as short-lived as they were, those situations really allowed for a variety of helmets for the different Egyptian gods to be released. This is one of those things that you couldn't afford to do on a television series, and there's a lot I think that you guys did manage to get on the screen, regardless, going to a new world every single week. The production schedule just must have been a frenzy. I don't know how Richard Hugh stayed on his feet.
He was amazing. And Bridget was amazing.
Bridget McGuire, is that right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, she was his art director, and then I think after I was gone, became the production.
Yes.
Yeah, she, the stuff they pulled off still amazes me. I'll tell you an interesting story about visual effects. We had more visual effects in that show than I think any show had ever had on television prior to that. It had a huge visual effects budget. And even then, we could only do a few an episode because it was so expensive. And in the years that we made this show, starting with the first season of Outer Limits, and then going to the third season of Stargate, the technology moved so fast that by the time I was leaving the show, we had moved from Silicon Graphics workstations to Macs, and we couldn't spend all the money we had in the effects budget because the technology had moved so fast. And
you had a surplus.
Yeah. So no, we moved it to other things.
Oh, okay.
But that moved, that enabled us to have the little Asgard alien walking around. In the beginning of the series, in the first season, he was just a rubber puppet. You can never see him below the waist. In the second
season, he appeared, and then third, he was digital for a couple shots.
Yeah, and he got more and more digital. But it was just amazing how fast technology moved. And now I'm doing this space show where we wouldn't even consider doing all the stuff we're doing back then, because one shot would cost our whole budget, And now we're going to be cranking out all these visual effects. Outpost had sometimes as many as 500 effect shots in an episode, which is crazy.
That's feature film,
Yeah.
That's
absolutely. It's just gotten so easy to do or inexpensive to do in terms of the equipment. The artists still cost money, but
of course, there was a set amount. Bruce Woloshyn and had mentioned this when Rainmaker was shooting was involved in Stargate at the time. You had I think 3 or 4 different puddles for the pilot episode, Children of the Gods. And the puddle effect and the Stargate effect, that really is like the effect of that episode, because you're bringing that to life. And then you settled kind of on the look for it. But the puddle pass, according to the people who were digitally composing it, was always cost the same amount from the first episode to the last of Stargate, regardless of the technology that came about. And I was told that it was just because the amount of time that goes into creating it, regardless of how good it looks. So even though some technologies do evolve, there are certain price points that do stick.
Yeah. I don't know about that. In the first 3 seasons that I was there, that was true. I'm not sure why it would continue to be true after that, but if he says so.
Yeah,
I take credit for. Probably wrongly so, but in my own mind, I take credit for creating the visual effects business in Vancouver, because when we started, there were like 2 houses, and now it's like a visual effects hub, because we needed so many effects that all these companies started up to feed us, and grew and grew and grew and got bought out. And it's funny that all these companies are still there, and they started mostly for Outer Limits and then Stargate.
It's just crazy. The fabricators that you guys had, Stargate Productions had, the machined metal. Some of these pieces that are behind me here are at the end of 17 television seasons and are a product of you guys building year over year. This isn't cheap stuff. I have a suit downstairs that was $100,000 in development costs for Atlantis. It's not how much it's worth. That's how much it cost them to make. And it's beautiful, the stuff that you guys produced over the course of
our wardrobe department was another amazing department. It was a factory, because every time we went to a new planet, we had to have people dressed in alien clothing, and it had to be cranked out every episode.
What were some of your favorite aliens over the course of your time on this series? You guys introduced the Unas in season 1. The Asgard, obviously, we finally began to get a look at them in season 2. The Goa'uld were obviously a big part of the canon of the show. Peter Williams as Apophis, Sokar, David Palfy came in season 3 and did a great job. The Tok'ra were all cool. Who were some of your favorites mythologically and just to see on screen?
Well, mythologically, it was the Asgard, because in my mind, the Asgard were the Greys that have visited Earth supposedly. And to me, that's just kind of cool when it touches other parts of the real world. And they were cool little puppets and eventually CG guys. My favorite alien character, I think, was the Tok'ra, who was Carter's dad.
Yes. So that was Jacob Carter, played by the great Carmen Argenziano. He had Selmac in him.
Yes. Wow. You really remember all this. He was my favorite character just because it had such great drama to it. Here's this man who's going to die of cancer, and if he takes this alien into him, he'll survive. And his strained relationship with his daughter, and Carmine was just such an amazing actor.
He was a wonderful guy.
Yeah, he really was.
And one of the things that we haven't talked about is the fact that this is sci-fi that is deliberately set in the here and now, and you didn't see a ton of that then. It was spaceships and planets and space stations and a lot of that. And he had lymphoma. And how often do you encounter something like that in a sci-fi show that we as audience members can go and say, I knew someone who dealt with that, and we see a portion of ourselves more on screen, more earnestly than we would a Starfleet insignia in the 24th century.
Yeah. That's a big reason that I wanted to make Stargate in the first place. I always said it's a way to do Star Trek in the present, visiting alien planets and alien cultures and so on, but with today's technology instead of with advanced magic technology.
Absolutely. So the Asgard in your mind, from the word go, did you want them to be the Roswell Greys, or did that kind of evolve as you went along?
No, that was always in my mind.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
first it came out of Norse mythology. And I don't know if we even knew that there was the little guys at first, but once we knew that there were, I said, hey, wouldn't it be cool if they were the Greys? And we actually had that puppet from an episode of the Outer Limits that we altered to be.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So he appeared in Outer Limits first.
Yeah. In a little bit, he was a little different. We changed him a little bit, but yeah.
Okay. Wow. There's some episodes that I've missed. Absolutely. And whose idea was it to bring in Michael as the voice of Thor?
I don't remember whose idea that was. It wasn't my idea.
Okay.
I can't take credit for that. I don't remember.
It was a successful character.
Yeah.
Did you see the rest of the show? Did you watch it to its conclusion?
I've seen some of them. I haven't seen all of them.
Okay.
I was just too busy, and I was running 2 other shows, and it also it went in a different direction than I would have gone with the show, which was certainly Brad and Robert's prerogative, but that made it hard for me to watch. Do you know what I mean?
I think that you and Dean Devlin can appreciate that from that perspective. Once it moves on without you, it's like, well, I'm glad that it's successful, but it's not mine so much anymore.
Right. At first I was watching it and saying, well, that's interesting what they're doing. And then I was saying, oh, I wouldn't have done that. And, after a while, I just kind of lost interest a little bit, even though my friends were all making the show and I wanted to watch it because they were doing it. But other than that, I wouldn't have watched it. So
I understand. The development with Atlantis, Brad was laying that groundwork in season 1. I'm curious to see, did you watch that pilot? What did you think of it? And what would you have done differently, knowing that was seeds that were planted when you were still working with them?
It really wasn't planted when I was there. So if it was, he never told me about it.
Yeah, in season 1, there's an episode called Solitudes where a second Stargate is found in the Arctic. And that is
the one?
Right. That's.
I don't think Brad knew that was going to lead to Atlantis, though.
Okay.
Maybe he did and never told me that, but I think he went back to that and said, "Oh, that would be cool if that was,
Okay. Connecting those two together.
Yeah. But By the way, that was such a wild episode when we shot that.
How so?
We shot it in a refrigerated soundstage, so we'd have the breath.
Martin Wood's first episode
Yeah.
as full director.
Yep. And which is something you just don't do. It was insane. When we told the studio we were going to bring in giant air conditioning units and refrigerate the set to the point where you can see people's breaths, they said, "You're out of your mind," but we did it.
You wanted to make
Took
it
a whole
real.
soundstage.
You wanted to make it real.
Yeah.
And it's one of the best episodes in season 1 because it addresses, not only is it just like a good bottle episode in itself, these two people trapped in a cave together, it addresses that tension between the two characters, and they grow closer as a result, despite the fact that there are certain bridges that they can't cross.
Did you ever see the outtake of Amanda and
Stuck
Rick
on
in
a
that?
glacier with MacGyver? Fantastic. Absolutely. What was it? Bringing the Air Force were consultants on the show. Whose idea was this to get the Air Force or was it something that was, if you're going to do the U.S. Air Force, you have to have involvement from them? Was that some kind of mandate to have them as close as they were?
I'm not sure how it came about. I think it came about, but I'm not positive, that our wardrobe people contacted the U.S. Air Force to find out how they could get wardrobe that was real uniforms. And the Air Force then contacted us and said, "We would like to support this show and be consultants on it. And in return, we will give you uniforms and soldiers and weapons and airplanes down the line and so on." So we were, yes, please. And it was a challenge sometimes. And there were a few episodes that they took their name off of, but still let us do. I remember a few arguments I had with them that were, in retrospect, hysterical. There's an episode where O'Neill and Teal'c, and I think a couple other characters, go to Area 51.
Correct.
And there was a line in it where Rick says, "Is this where you keep all the little green men?" And I got a call from the from the Air Force that said, "There are no little green men at Area 51. And I said, "It's a joke."
Yeah, you give that
He's
line
joking.
to Reynolds in Touchstone.
And he said, I don't care. There are no aliens at Area 51, and you cannot imply it in any way, shape, or form. And I said, "All right, well, let me think about it, and I'll get back to you and see if we can come up with a compromise." And I called him back, and I said, "How about this? How about Rick says, is this where you keep the little green men?" And the soldier that he's talking to says, "There are no aliens at Area 51. And then Rick looks at Teal'c and says, "Present company excluded." And the guy cracked up so hard that he said, "All right, you can do that as long as the soldier says our line, which is
right.
There are no aliens at Area 51.
That is so good. Have you and Dean had the conversation about the Air Force pulling their support for Independence Day because of showing Area 51?
No, I've never asked him about that.
They
I'll have to ask
did.
him about that.
They sure did. They would not support the film. It's in one of the special features for one of the DVDs. They would not support Independence Day because Independence Day showed aliens at Area 51. So this is right in line with it.
Wow.
Something's going on, man. If it wasn't, who would care? Wow.
Yeah,
That's
I don't know.
crazy.
So then the other good story was the time we had a parallel universe, and Amanda is a civilian, and she and
Kowalski.
O'Neill kiss.
Oh yes, point of view.
And they said that that subordinate officer and superior officer cannot have a relationship.
Yep.
And we said, even in a parallel universe,
right?
And they said, we don't want to go there. It's too much of a can of worms for us, and they took their name off that one.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I remember in season 1, you did the Ultimate Reality with There Before the Grace of God, which is one of the greatest episodes there is, because it's like all the chickens come home to roost. And that's the one where Carter was made a civilian, she was still an astrophysicist. But I thought that it worked because, you have to have some kind of tension between the male and the female lead. You have to, there is eros there. This is a television show. And I think that dance, even though it played out over 8 seasons, as long as Rick was on that show, I think it was successful, but would you have had, all things being equal, Jonathan, would you have had, them ended up together if you could have?
That's too much of a hypothetical, because
Okay.
it would have depended on everything that happened between episode 3 and when they got together. But I always hoped that at some point one of them would leave the military and then they would admit their love for each other. But I'm not sure we would have ever been able to get there, because so much happened between then and then.
This is true. There's an Atlantis in Atlantis season 4. Carter took over the base, and there is a deleted scene where she is asked if she is seeing anyone, and she says yes, but he's in Washington D.C. and I don't get back very often. And at that point, O'Neill was reassigned to the Pentagon. So even though it's a deleted scene, there's a lot of shippers out there who still hope.
Yeah, nice little hint.
What do you look to do with the arc in terms of how many seasons are you looking at? What do you want to bring to the screen through all of your body of work that you've not really had a chance to do yet?
I'm just not that intellectual.
Okay.
And by that, I mean, to me, I look at my job as being to entertain people.
Okay.
And so what I want to do more than anything is make a show that, like I thought Stargate was, that's just fun, a fun romp that people want to tune into every day to escape all the crap that's going on in the real world, and just have fun and hang out with this group of people we create that they want to hang out with. And if along the way we deliver a few little subtle metaphors, a few little lessons, I think that's what science fiction's best at. But that's not the primary goal ever. The primary goal is have fun. I've sci-fi heads probably hate me for this, but I've spoken at some of the conventions, and people will ask me a question like, so when you made Apophis do this to this, were you trying to say that the meaning of life in the world is? And my response is always, no, I thought it was cool.
Absolutely.
I thought it was fun. It made me smile. That's just how I write, how I run shows. So that's why that question is a hard question for me to answer, because the answer is just I want to make a show that entertains people and people want to come back to, and that is successful.
We had Dean on when we launched, and he told us about how much he loves working with you. What is it like working with Dean Devlin?
Well, I'll tell you the story of our meeting. I hope it doesn't rub him the wrong way, because he'll hear it. But I had written a pilot that he read. So I get a call from my agents that said, Dean Devlin wants to meet with you and hear if you have any ideas. And I said, you're punking me. He's punking me, because he did not like Stargate, the series, and had been pretty vocal about that.
In the commentary, he says it. We have no relationship with the series.
Yeah. And I thought that, I said, does he know who I am? Does he know that I'm the guy who did the series? And they said, yeah, he knows who you are. He wants to meet with you. So I went in and I met with him and I pitched to him. And Dean has this habit, he still does it to me today, where you're pitching this great idea that has all these places where he should laugh and where he should go, oh, cool. And he listens like this. And you're sure while you're pitching it that he just hates it, right? And when I finished the pitch, he said, "I love that. Let's do it." And then he went on and on about what he loved about it, and we went out with this series, and we became fast friends pitching this series.
This is Outpost, or is this?
No,
or is
it's
this
another
before
show.
Outpost?
Another show
it's before.
that we're still trying to sell. We haven't sold it yet.
Okay.
And when that seemed to have been dead on the vine, he said, "I have this show called Outpost that needs a showrunner. Would you take a look at it?" And I did. And I came in with all kinds of demands to the guys who created it, who were these new, young, talented guys who had never really done television. And they agreed to all of it, and Dean agreed to all of it. So I did it. And Dean and I have been hitting it off ever since. You know, we did 4 years of that. And when that ended, he said, "Hey, I've got this other thing. You want to come do this?" And still going with him. So
wow.
He and I we think the same creatively. I mean, we both, that answer I gave you a minute ago about just entertaining.
Yeah.
That's Dean's thing. That's how he believes in doing TV and movies. And so that's how we both think, so it's turned out to be great. I can't think of another guy I'd rather work with.
The idea of the circle transcends all kinds of mediums and storytelling. One of the oldest symbols in the world, but the idea of the gate, and working with Roland to create that, they created something that they only lightly scratched the surface of in the feature film, and you guys recognized that and took it in a different direction than he would have taken it, but you still recognized the creative impulse there of what could be achieved with that idea.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, we've talked about it since then, and he and Roland wanted to make a series of movies, and they kind of had that ripped out from under them by MGM, who wanted it to be a series and wouldn't let them do the series because of they wanted to do this big series that MGM would not be able to afford to do, and they felt like it would bankrupt them, so they didn't agree to do it. And so they were bitter about it, rightfully. I don't blame them. It was their baby that they had already planned on making these movies out of. And then Dean said, then the final nail in the coffin was when he saw the nudity in the pilot. He said, that doesn't belong in this universe. And that kind of pissed him off, and he never watched it again. So I've said, Dean, you really should go watch a few of them. I think we stuck pretty close to what you wanted to be doing, and I think you might actually like the show.
Might actually
I don't think
enjoy
he
it.
has.
No, I don't blame him. And that was the conversation that had. Once the child has been taken out of your hands, it's going to be attended to by someone else. But having said all that, 17 seasons of television, and the fandom, myself included, that exists to this day, something's working. And
he planted the seed.
He planted a beautiful seed indeed, and I am so grateful. That we've been able to have him on, but that I think it's so cool that the two of you have found common ground and are continuing to create together. It just shows you can never be surprised.
It's so full circle. It really is amazing.
I cannot wait to see what you guys have.
I think it's going to be a great show. Everything we're coming up with so far is exciting. The sets are exciting. Seeing actors reading the parts is, it's going to be a fun show. In fact, I just got another stack of tapes.
Auditions? Oh, terrific. Fun times.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun and it's depressing at the same time, because for every, great person you see, there's 15 that you just, you almost want to call their agent and say, tell this guy to get another job, because
absolutely,
this poor guy,
he's wasting his time.
Yeah.
Is this going to be a strictly human show, or is there a possibility of alien life in one form or another? Okay.
I'm not telling.
Okay. You'll have to tune in.
Yes.
All right. That's legit. We can count on humans and we can count on spaceship. Spaceship.
Exactly.
Do you have the ship look? Do you have the look of the ship figured out yet? Do you know what you want it to look
built.
like?
We've already got the digital model built, and we're building the interior now. Yeah,
that's great.
I wish I could show it to you, but I think sci-fi would kill me.
No, I'm hoping
we have like blueprints of it as if it were a real ship with where each room is and what the hallways look like to get between them. And it's a big ship.
Did you want more real? Are you going for more abstract? Do you want the ship to look good, or do you want the ship to look okay? That in 100 years could exist.
Yeah, that real. It's actually based. A lot of the look is based on the SpaceX projections of what some of their ships are going to look like, combined with a lot of NASA stuff.
Okay.
So it's we've got to invent some technologies just to be able to tell stories like gravity. That's a challenge. And for a while, we were having people climbing ladders and being anti-gravity and floating around. And we just realized we can't tell all these stories that way. It's just going to kill us. So, so there's a gravity device that's creating artificial gravity that we'll never really explain. We have to do stuff like that. But
absolutely,
on the most part, it's very real.
Okay.
It's kind of like on Stargate, everybody speaks English. We had to just accept that.
That was just one of those things. One of the last things that I was always kind of surprised at was because the language barrier was such a key aspect of the feature film. I always assumed that had I been in your guys' shoes, I would have introduced a device that would have fit in the palm of the hand very quickly in one of the first couple of episodes, so that they would have an excuse rather than, well, they all speak English. Some kind of technological component to explain that, because it is a big plot hole. We
did toy with that, and the problem with that was, first of all, it would have felt like we were stealing it from Star Trek.
That's fair. Universal
and
translator.
The second thing is that technology just did not exist at that time, and we were setting it at a real time. And so we were trying to use all real technology, and right down to the drone, the bomb robot that we used as a drone to go through the gate.
That's so cool.
It was all real technology. We didn't want to use any made up technology, and so we hypothesized that the ancients and maybe the Gould had spread humanity all over the universe and our language with it. So a little bit of a cheat, but that was kind of our explain it away thing.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And the Gould, by their nature, wouldn't have bothered with some kind of translator device. They wouldn't have cared. If you don't speak their language, too bad. We're going to enslave you. You'll learn that way. That makes sense.
So. Right, but it's still a little bit of a cheat. I mean, I'll readily admit it, but sometimes you have to do that to make the drama work. You can't have subtitles on every
This is true.
Culture you come to, you just can't do it.
You can't give Daniel a week to figure out what everyone's saying and then cut back to the episode. You've got to move the story along. So at some point you have to just buy that, there are Vancouvers throughout the galaxy, Yep. That would have been the one thing that I'm glad that you were able to do desert locations with that continually reduced patch of land that was up there. But
you know what that was, right?
I don't.
It was either a sand quarry or a gravel quarry. It was literally just big piles of sand that had been put there artificially for that's how they supplied sand,
right?
Sandboxes and construction sites and stuff, and that's where it was stored. And we would go there and shoot, and they allowed us to bulldoze it into dunes and whatever we needed. Yeah, and the rest of the problem with Vancouver is that it's not a problem if you live there. It's gorgeous. It's all green and lush. But when you're trying to do different planets, they're all green and lush.
It works as Colorado Springs and green and lush planets, but beyond that, you're right. So you got a lot of mileage out of that area, let me tell you. So both on set and outside. So it worked.
Yeah, and we used a lot of visual effects to augment
locations.
But that's why we took Outpost to Stargate. To Serbia. We started the show in Utah. If you ever watched the first season, it's embarrassing because it's so low budget. And so we moved it to Belgrade, where there are real castles and real medieval places that we could shoot. and just the production value quadrupled, quintupled, whatever at that point. And so I wish we could have done that with Stargate, is traveled with it, but it's just too big a unit to move around like that. We just couldn't do it.
And a big gate to boot. My understanding was John Smith had told me it would take a day to put up and a day to take down.
Well, we had 2 gates. We had the one in actually 3, I think. We had one in the standing set that was permanent and worked in terms of turning.
Yeah, the gear.
Another planet. And then we had the road gates.
Right.
Variations on the road gates that could be put up and torn down. Yeah.
It's when everything, you see everything that goes into it, it's amazing what got done back in 1997. When now it's just like, we'll just do an insert here and spaceship will be here in just a few days. Got an animatic this afternoon. Like you said, Exactly. It's extraordinary how fast technology has moved. It's kind of, it's frankly scary in some ways. So it's like almost like we can't keep ahead of it. But
yeah, I mean, I think it's actually hurting a lot of movies and TV because they're too reliant on it.
Oh, they're leaning on it too much.
You know what I mean? Like when I watch a James Bond, now I used to watch a James Bond movie and go, God, I can't believe they did that. Now I look at it and I go, that was CG. He didn't really jump. He didn't really jump from the helicopter onto the train.
Yeah, it's frustrating when I go and watch a special feature or an extra or something, and I found out, like in The Matrix, there's a scene where Neo and Trinity actually in the film they jumped off a high rise. So one of the actors told me that they actually pulled this off, but as an audience member, you just assume at this point that it's done digitally, and they actually went and did it. Yeah, and that's too bad.
Yeah, I heard that too, and then you look at it as a producer, I look at it as, well, what a waste. Why did they make that? Why did they put those 2 actors at risk when they could have just done it digitally? Because the audience is going to think it's digital anyway.
They don't know any better at this point. We've trained them to behave that way.
Right.
So, well, it's just it's the future is not going to be boring in terms of visual effects and storytelling and everything. The number of things that you can achieve now in camera and within a TV budget now is just extraordinary. And I can't wait to see what you guys do.
Well, thank you. I'll stay in touch and let you know once we have stuff that I'm allowed to show you.
Yeah, once we get a I'd love to see the pilot and have that aired to everyone, and then have you back so that we can have fans discuss that and your ideas for that, and get a few more Stargate stories, particularly the episodes that you wrote, back under our belts here. So it has been wonderful to have you.
Dean Devlin wrote the pilot, and he is directing the pilot, so it should be pretty spectacular.
Oh, all right. Okay.
And I'm writing the second one, and will not be directing that one because I've got to keep the writers going. But I'll probably direct some later.
That was about my next question. Okay, so it's in the plans at some point down the line.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with the fact that it shoots in Belgrade and the writing is here, it's not like I can just run down to the set and direct and then run up to the writer's room and talk to the writers. So
where are you?
We have to finish the scripts. I'm in LA.
You're in LA. What's the time difference there to Belgrade?
9 hours.
That's a day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it takes about 16 hours to get there.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, thank God for fiber internet. So
at
least get some dailies or.
Thank God for Zoom.
Yes.
We have production meetings every day now, and it's, half of us are in Belgrade, half of us, or a third of us are in London, and the rest of us are here.
Remarkable technology.
Yeah.
Jonathan, again, thank you so much, and best of fortune on this next endeavor. I know it's going to be something that I'm going to want to watch, and we will have you back when there's something to see and talk about.
Okay, great. Thanks. Nice talking to you, David.
Very nice talking to you. Jonathan Glassner, Stargate SG-1 co-creator. It was wonderful to have him on. I haven't spoken with him in a number of years, and he's someone I've been trying to get on board for Dial the Gate for a long time now and have just not found the right contact information. And it's one of those things where, you know, once you do make contact with someone and they understand what it is that we're trying to do, it's magic. And it was terrific to have him on for this episode. Dial the Gate is brought to you every week for free, and we do appreciate you tuning in. If you want to support the show further, buy yourself some of our themed swag. We're now offering t-shirts, tank tops, sweatshirts, and hoodies for all ages, as well as cups and other accessories in a variety of sizes and colors at dialthegate.com. You can click on the merchandise click on a specific design to see what items are being offered. Checkout is fast and easy. You can use a credit card or PayPal. Just visit dialthegate.com or go straight there at dialthegate.com/merch. And thanks so much for your support. I appreciate you so much for tuning in. Thanks to my team for making this happen. My producer, Linda, Gategabber Fury, thank you so much. As well as my moderating staff, Summer, Tracy, Keith, Jeremy, Reese, and Anthony. You guys make the show possible. Big thanks to Frederick Marcoux at Concepts Web. He's our web developer on Dial the Gate. And also a big thanks to Jeremy, our webmaster, who keeps dialthegate.com up to date. I appreciate you tuning in. I appreciate the continued growth of this show, and that we're just continuing to reach the 20,000 subscriber, push towards the 20,000 subscriber number. We're at a really great position for whenever MGM and Amazon decide that they're going to launch the next big Stargate thing, whatever that's going to be, whenever that's going to be. And I can't wait to see what happens next. So I appreciate you tuning in. We'll see you next week for Joseph Malazzi on the other side.